Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Schools to Industry Pipeline Solution, where we're going to be speaking to service providers who are culturally competent for our children. We're going to be going across various areas that provide solutions for our children. And what we are set up to do now is take over from a system which was designed for our children not to prosper. Fortunately, government is now ready to speak with us based on world events, as unfortunate as they are, but it's made our voice more relevant than ever. And it is a very sad thing. And I knew the minute I saw the video that this would be the straw that broke the camel's back. And unfortunately for George Floyd's life being sacrificed, we are now here having a serious conversation around race and ethnicity and the African question as the descendants of Africans who were kidnapped in the transatlantic slave trade. Well, here we are. So I'm going to introduce my guests and let them tell you a little about what they do. How do you fit into the schools to industry pipeline? So first, we're going to hear from our brother, Julian Hall from Ultra Kids, which is an entrepreneurial acumen training. Julian.
How are you, Dean? Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Every day.
Good to be in the same room with such a company. But I mean, as you say, it's a shame that we've been doing this work for so long, but it takes a tragic event to dial up the immediacy of the response from government, from schools, both at a local and a national level. But here we are, and we take these circumstances and use them for the betterment of our community. And in the work that I do with Ultra Education, in teaching entrepreneurship to kids, our lane is young people. Our lane is using entrepreneurship as a way to increase the life chances and the value of their lives. I mean, I was in a meeting just recently where I had a counsellor who, under normal circumstances, and there was a spirit of goodwill behind it, and they said that their ambition for young people is to earn £40,000 to £50,000 a year. And when I heard that, I laughed because yesterday on Facebook, somebody said, well, that's what we should be earning each month. And I guess, if you're working within a system where that's a lot of money, then I get it. But that's not my ambition for our young people. And interestingly enough, and it's something that I try and talk about as much as possible, because whenever we think about business and entrepreneurship, or in fact, if we think about sports, business and entrepreneurship, entertainment, the legal profession, whatever it is, there's always usually a Eurocentric archetype which is attached to those things. So if you think about business and entrepreneurship, most people will think of Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, when actually the richest, most successful businessman in the world was Mansa Musa. And nobody but ourselves is going to reinforce that narrative. So when our kids are thinking about being businessmen and being entrepreneurs, for me, we need to hold up that archetype, and the archetype of whether it's the Jay-Z's, the P. Diddy's, and the many business people and entrepreneurs that exist in the UK, yourself, Dean, Nana, and some of the other amazing business people that we have in the UK, because otherwise, it's difficult for them to buy into that example of entrepreneurship outside of being on road. Right, so we need to keep reinforcing that narrative, because otherwise, if they're in school and they're told about business and entrepreneurship, and the teachers can't give them a reference that looks like them, then emotionally it's difficult for them to embed that narrative. And then what happens is when they go out into the world, if they go out into the city of London to try and do business, it's very difficult for them to see faces like their own. And then what happens is, even if they are confident enough to be in those scenarios, they feel that they need to leave their identity at the door. And I said to a young man recently who's got a YouTube channel, an Instagram channel, his name's Joshua, I've forgotten his last name now, but he said, what advice would I give to young entrepreneurs who are kind of in their late teens, early 20s? And I said that this idea of cultural capital that you'll hear big corporate talk about. I said, you guys have that in shed loads, because when corporates are trying to connect with, you know, the urban demographic or with whatever's cool or with whatever's coming, they will parachute in and have conversations with you guys and then parachute out and then try and interpret that in their own ways. And I'm saying to these guys, well, look, you are the source of what the future holds, right? And there is a capital in that. There's a huge capital in you just remaining who you are, not editing it, not apologizing for it, and not leaving it at the door. And so for me, there's a flavor of entrepreneurship which causes me to wear a hoodie and a Superman logo, and I'm in camo, right? Because this is the kind of, because this is just who I want to be, right? I spent a long time when I was in corporates in suits and ties, and you look better in a suit than I do, Dean, so I leave that to you. But I think the point is that many of these things can be expressed in different ways, and young people need to be able to see that, right? They need to be able to see that they can still be themselves and express their hopes and their dreams, not based on a 40 or 50K ceiling, but actually 6 figures and 7 figures, right? And then thinking about what individuals like Akon are doing, which is countrywide, right? So we need to start, and the only vehicle that allows us to do that is business and entrepreneurship. So that's why I'm such a huge evangelist of it. And it's the reason why we start at such a young age. So we start teaching kids at 7 years old. In fact, my wife was on a Zoom call with a grandmother who wanted to put her 6-year-old grandchild, her 6-year-old grandson, because she said he needs to start learning these things now. And, you know, a child can learn a musical instrument, they can learn a whole bunch of languages by the time they're 5 or 6 years old. Why not entrepreneurship? Why not critical thinking, problem solving, resilience, leadership, teamwork, coming up with great ideas, marketing, all of these things they can learn from a very young age, because we are throwing products at them, we're throwing services at them, adverts are being pumped at them all the time. They are consumers by the time they can walk. So we're happy for them to be consumers, but what we need to do is pull the curtain and show them the other side of that business model and how they can understand it, so that when they do get to an age where they can exercise that, they are not the 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs that fail. And this is the other reason why I want to do this work, because the fact that there's such a high failure rate in entrepreneurship, in my mind, is because the topic isn't introduced early enough. And so therefore, you know, it's a little bit like saying, we're going to start teaching you maths at 18 years old. Like, how are you going to get your head around it? So I think the reason why this hasn't been done before is because entrepreneurship hasn't always been tied to a way in which to help young people who are, I hate using the term disadvantaged, but for the purpose of this forum, most people understand that term. It's not really been applied in that way in its purest form. And that's often because entrepreneurs that have the ability to do that aren't either from our community, or they become disconnected from our community. So they don't care. They just, they're okay. They're doing their thing. They're looking after their family and whatever it might be. And that's all good. But, you know, I was born and bred in Brent. I still live in Brent, and I saw, and I'm still very closely connected to a lot of the issues that happen with young people on road. And I also saw their ambition to be multi-millionaires in their younger years, right? And I also, which we all see, the skill sets that they exercise. I mean, I spoke at London Probation a few years ago, and there was a police officer who was talking about one of their initiatives. I can't remember what it was called, but one of their initiatives to come and you might want to remind me. It was about kind of, you know, drug raids and things like that, and it was something watch. But anyway, he made a point saying that in the last year they've seized over £1 million worth of product and cash from gangs just in South London. Right now, I was waiting for somebody to give them a round of applause, right? But what they do is they take that talent, they incarcerate that talent, whereas anyone with an ounce of entrepreneurial, you know, blood flowing through their veins would say, let's go and speak to these young people, because what they've done by generating that sum of money without any help is the kind of thing that well-funded startups cannot do. You have startups, you have companies who receive millions of pounds, right? Who cannot generate revenue, right? I met an individual, a friend of mine, who just came from Amsterdam. his company, he was chief technical officer of a company that was given £3 million. They could not generate revenue from that, right? And we sit here and we chuckle, because if you give us, you know, a minutiae of that, we can flip it, right? Much less if you give these kids on road that because they're already doing that, is the point, right? So there's a clear misalignment in the stakeholders who say they want to help, but perhaps don't have the bridges or the people who care about the destination for young people. But that's one of the reasons why you know, we exist and why we're so passionate about the work that we do. And you know, it's something that, you know, we believe will help to build the generational wealth, because at the very forefront of activism is now the dynamics around wealth building and generational wealth. But we can't do that having a job. We can't do that within structures that we now know are institutionally racist. It's not going to happen, right? We have to create our own structures, and it's not a knock on those who have jobs. That's fine. Maybe go and support somebody who has a business. You know, maybe contribute in some way, whether it's volunteering, whether it's financing, whether it's you know, some kind of support, whether it's just a kind word. But everyone is able to contribute in some way. So for me, you know, just to kind of wrap up, I think it's really important for forums like this to exist, because there are so many grassroots organizations who are doing amazing work. And I think we just need to continue to work together as much as we can, starting with dialogues, quickly following on to actions, so that we can have a greater impact on our community and our young people.
And it's beautiful as an evangelist, just in summing up what you said, as an entrepreneurial evangelist, because you speak about the public facing people, but you know Steve Stout is the cultural capital guy.
Absolutely.
And agency Translation was made tens of millions on their cultural capital and selling that expertise to so-called mainstream industry. So we all know that every single community is on a bound to uphold, promote, and preserve their culture. But where, based on that transatlantic slave trade, we do feel that unique thing about fitting in to everybody else's culture, we leave ours behind. And that is why we're in the position. So I'm so glad you brought it up. But in the skills that you offer, it just, and what you know that entrepreneurs, people who aren't entrepreneurs may not know, is it produces so many transferable skills, problem solving skills, irrespective of whether they choose to work in sweat equity inside of a business, because they may not be the chief exec, they may be the CFO, they might be an operations officer, but they've got the skills to actually work inside of industry that isn't structured. So I wish we could talk about entrepreneurialism and business all day, but we've got a lineup and we are on the clock. So thank you for your contribution. But more importantly, I look forward to working with you within the pipeline, with us sitting down with central government and taking all of those resources as service providers who are culturally competent, that they've always had other people babysit our resources and then top slice those resources and trickle down in a way that we can't build robust businesses to deliver to our children directly. So thank you, Julian.
Thank you, sir.
And over to my brother Khonsu at Manhood Academy. And with Manhood Academy as a rites of passage organization, we had a consultation last year with over 80 African diasporan delivery practitioners for youth engagement. And there was 100% adoption in the room, that all of our children, irrespective of two parents, single parent, millionaires, low income, should be entered into rites of passage, because it delivers a high cultural self-esteem for our children as a grounding to start. So Khonsu, can you tell us a little bit about how you fit into the pipeline and what your vision is for our children? Yes, sir.
Well, our specialist field at Manhood Academy is right
And you've frozen, sir.
The problems we're trying to solve with our young people. I mean, you got me?
You're good. And
yeah, right. Yeah.
We are technical difficulty.
Yeah, you good? Yeah.
Today. You're good, sir. And you're frozen again.
Okay, so
I'll tell you what we'll do. If you reset,
it's our
whilst
special
you're resetting, we'll move on to Nana, and we'll move on to Claudine from taking positive steps, and we'll come right back to you. So if you reset and sign back in, thank you, brother. And Claudine from taking positive steps. If you can tell us what you do in terms of student advocacy.
Hi, okay, so my name's Claudine Dewberry, CEO of an organisation called Taking Positive Steps Foundation. What we do, we are based in Haringey presently. We also have working sites in Lewisham, Hackney, and out in Birmingham. We have an advocacy program that works with parents. We basically challenge the school to prison pipeline. So it's actually really good because right now I'm teaming up with an industry who's doing school to industry pipeline. But as we know at the moment, we've got a bigger challenge in the school to prison pipeline because so many of our children and young people are excluded from school, and being excluded from school means that they often end up being groomed. They often end up being pressured by their peers. They often end up in trap houses. And that's where it becomes the school to prison pipeline. Presently in the UK, we've got over 9,000 children between the ages of 4 and 15 who are excluded from school. So really and truly, that's what we do. Now, people say, okay, well, you're challenging the school to prison pipeline. You're advocating on behalf of children and young people. But how much power do you have? We as parents have a lot of power, and that's what Taking Positive Steps are trying to do. We are trying to educate parents to the amount of power that they have, because this government, this society would allow us to believe that as parents, we don't have any power when it comes to our children's education. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but we must also acknowledge that as parents, we disempower ourselves. And the reason I say we disempower ourselves is because if we take when a child goes to secondary school, because that's normally where our biggest problem begins, it's that transfer from year 6 to year 7. We may look at a school, we may look at the most local school, or we may look at Ofsted and see what is the school on the league table that's doing best. We may go along and we may visit the school and we think, okay, that's where I'm going to put my child. Now, because the league table says that this school is doing fantastically, that has nothing to do with nothing. And anybody that trusts the words of Ofsted, come talk to me. Ofsted is a government operated process. It has nothing to do with anything. What you really need to do is you need to go and see the students who are in the school. You need to go and talk to the parents of the children who are going through the school, and you need to get feedback. Now, parents will say, yeah, but I went to the parents' evenings and I went to the open days and I saw what was going on. That has nothing to do with anything. So this is what I'm saying. We fail our children. We find a school and we place our children there and we hand over authority to the school. Yep. We don't bother to turn around and every 3 months, every month and say, how is my child doing? Yeah. Has my child got a struggle? Do you need my help? Right. Now, as I often say to parents, when I went to school, we had parents' evenings twice a year. Things have now been scaled back so much that you only have parents' evening once a year. You're not learning anything in that once a year, because if your child is struggling, they're already struggling and you don't know about that. If your child is getting in trouble and they're always in detention, and you kind of go along with the school that they're in detention because they're being naughty. Why are you not asking why? Why are they constantly in detention? And then the detention gets upscaled to isolation. Why is my child constantly in isolation? And parents don't take the time to understand that this detention and this isolation has a long-term impact. It impacts on their mental well-being. The trauma that it is caused by this constant isolation, this constantly being put in this detention, the constantly being held behind, it is a form of trauma. Yeah. It also impacts on the confidence of our children. A lot of children, you know, as parents, we will say, don't talk back to me. Right? But in school, they need to be able to talk back. They need that confidence to be able to ask a question. They need that confidence to be able to challenge the teachers. What you say isn't necessarily right. Yeah? And an example of that was back in 2009, I went back to uni to do my MA in social work. And that was 5 years after the special guardianship orders had come out. So now I'm expecting, because remember, I did my first qualification in social work back in the 90s. I'll come back in 2009. So obviously the course has been updated. So considering we've got new orders and new legislation that the government's handing out, I'm expecting that to be part of the course. So, but they weren't teaching about special guardianship orders. And when I challenged the teacher on it, the teacher said, well, I don't know about that. So you'll have to investigate that yourself. So this is what I'm saying. If the children are not able to challenge the teacher and you take everything as gospel, yeah, or you challenge the teacher and the teacher feels aggrieved because you've challenged them, then, you know, your child becomes labeled. Another thing that parents do is, you know, they're often said, your child is lazy, your child is naughty. Those are labels. Why are we accepting them? Don't accept them, because if you accept, and those labels normally come from primary school. So you get your 4-year-old who goes into the reception class. This 4-year-old who's come from nursery, where Ofsted says children learn by playing, free play, okay? So we've now taken our child out of a free play nursery and we've put them into reception. So August, you're in a free play nursery. September, you're in reception. And the teacher wants you to sit down and get on. The children ain't doing that. I don't work like this. You know, in the nursery, they told me to run around. So all of a sudden, parents are being told, well, you have to teach your child to sit on the carpet and keep still. Well, why do we have to do that? You need to find a new way of engaging the child so now that they're ready for learning. And, you know, I say to parents, yes, we as a community, we're encouraging the building of our own schools and our own education system. But until we get there, we have to do with what we've got. And in order to do what we've got to challenge them. Yeah, we've got to challenge them, and we can't allow them to tell us this is the standard, this is what we're offering, and this is what you got, because that's not what we've got. Yeah, parents also need to remember the schools are a business, Dean. The school is a business. So every time our child goes to school, they go to school with their own bank account. I try to tell parents, your child goes to school with their bank book in their pocket, and the teacher has to work for their wages. So if you break it down, that a 4 to 8-year-old costs us about £4,000 a year. An 8 to 10-year-old will cost us about £7,000 a year, and it goes up in scale. So our secondary school children cost us about £10,000 a year. Yeah. Why are the teachers not working for it? We need to be able to say to the teacher, actually, my child comes to school with their own bank account. Like we go to work, right? Mm-hmm. We have to fulfill a contract in order to get paid. Why are we not making sure that they fulfill their contract to get paid? Why are we not holding them accountable? A lot of us are not holding them accountable, right? And what we also don't realize is that if a child is excluded from mainstream education and they're put into an alternative education, nobody don't tell you that this alternative education is then going to cost the taxpayer a lot more money, because an alternative education provision costs anything between £16,000 and £25,000 for one individual per year. Now, look at how it's jumped.
So we're looking at these resources, and other communities are coming in who aren't culturally competent. And even though it might be an alternative provision, our children may not be benefiting anymore. And this is why I want you to just quickly speak to your vision for what you do, because you get to see it when it goes wrong. And this is where we need to know, we know what all of the other delivery partners do when it goes right. But if you speak to your vision, because you are called in when it goes wrong.
Yeah, so taking positive steps are called in by parents when it goes wrong. When it goes wrong is when your child is about to be excluded, and we're called in to say, how do we help? How do we stop this? Can we stop this? And if we can't stop this, what's the next step? So the next step, as you said, is they're going to the alternative provision. The alternative provision doesn't do anything for our children, because that is definitely where it's going to go wrong. If they thought that these children were badly behaved in the first place, if they thought that they were uncontrollable in the first place, this is definitely where they're going to learn to behave in a disrespectful way. This is where they learn to disrespect the families, although the families have held on to them for so long. This is where education really goes down the drain. So for my vision is, until we have those schools that we can funnel our children into, is I will keep championing the cause. I will keep fighting the schools. I will keep trying to educate the parents. And what I'm doing is I'm building a team around me. So at the moment, it started off with Claudine fighting all these schools. Now we've got a collective of us who are well versed in going to fight the schools. We can use the legislation. Your same said legislation, we will use it against you. But also, what we have learned, which totally upsets your apple cart, you may say, we're excluding this child and this is where they're going. Well, actually, no, that's not where they're going, because I'm not giving you permission to do that. So I will hold my child at school, and at home rather, and I will educate them. Yeah. Or for a parent, if you think that your child is really struggling, and Dean, this is the hardest part. You know, I hear a lot of people talking about homeschooling. And I know that you homeschooled your son and it worked well for you. But a lot of parents can't homeschool their children because they're still out there doing that work, right? So they can't. But what they can do is put their children on a part-time timetable, right? Now, nobody tells you that, right? And when you then tell the school, actually, I'm going to put my child on a part-time timetable, and I'm only going to bring my child into school for the lessons that suits them, for the lessons that works for them, for the lessons that they want to do. Apart from that, I will keep them at home and I will educate them myself. That very quickly turns that one on the head, right? Also, we have to get the schools to realize, for example, a couple of years ago, we worked with an 11-year-old. He came over from primary school as a gifted and talented child, very, very bright young man. But all of a sudden, he's getting in trouble. So we've spoken to parents about, you know, what primary school was like, what he did. And they said, Claudine, the only thing that they used to feedback when we went to school was, there's nothing to feedback. He's doing it. He's meeting the targets, but he's a bit of a daydreamer. He wanders off in his head. He will be all over the place. But when you bring him back, he knows exactly what you were talking about. Well, he's taken this behavior into secondary school, and they've found that a challenge. He's kind of distant. He's wandered off in his head out of the classroom. So when the teacher's inviting him to come back, I can tell you what I say, but in the meantime, I'm looking out the window and I'm not really here. And they found that very dismissive and very rude. So we've challenged them now to do a couple of assessments with him. And what has happened was they've said that this child, the way he processes information cognitively is very different to a lot of children, 11, 12. Yeah. Okay, so what we've now invited parents to do, and I'll tell you why I've done this. I've said to them, okay, go along to your GP and get your GP to make a CAMS referral. go along and see CAMS and see what CAMS has said. So they followed the process and they've gone along to see CAMS. What CAMS has reported is that this child is a gifted and talented, high-performing child with ADHD, right? So that then means that because he's gifted and talented, he can, and he's high-performing. Yeah, he wanders off in his head, but bring him back, and he hasn't missed the thing that you've said. He's just not engaging with you, right? Now, people will say, well, CAMS does nothing for us. Sometimes we need to get a CAMS referral or report to be able to move it down. So what we've done, this 11-year-old is now 15, and we're still very much in contact with him. But what that has forced the school to do is to put things in place for him. So the teachers can no longer put him in isolation, because CAMS actually that does nothing for him, right? Because his brain doesn't process what you're doing, and it's not going to stop what he's doing. Right. So that one went out the window. You can no longer put this little man in isolation. You can also no longer put him in detention. You give him homework, and sometimes he does it. He will do the subjects that he's very happy with, and other times he doesn't. Right. OK, so now you're going to get him extra tuition to help him do his homework. Right. He's also now fallen into the bracket of those children who have an extra pupil premium, which means parents have now got extra support for him. But unless you have that knowledge and understanding, you're never going to know this, and they're going to bully you. And furthermore, schools are not going to tell you that this is how what you can do, and this is how you can support your child. So we're busy building a team around our children where we're not going to stop challenging these schools. We're not going to stop challenging these teachers, because we know also a lot of our children are bored, and also, you know, a lot of them don't want to do the lessons that you're teaching them. So they will take out the cream of the crop, those ones that they may be good at, or those ones where they see that they've got a future at, or they may want to go into that industry, and everything else. But I'm saying to parents, actually, stop badgering them to do this, because marks are about the school. They're about the school's outcomes. Right? They're about the school's league table. It's about the schools getting the best children. That's why they push your children to make sure that they get the best exam marks. We don't care. What we want our children to do is do the best that you can do at the subjects that benefit you. Apart from that, leave the rest behind.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things you said is about being culturally competent. And that leads us perfectly into our brother Khonsu at Manhood Academy. So thank you, Claudine. Continue to do what you're doing, and we look forward to you plugging in and being the safety net for our children.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to go back to our brother Khonsu, who had technical difficulties earlier. And he's going to tell us not only what Manhood Academy do, but also talk a little bit about the curriculum that they have. And just because we're on the clock, if we can keep it down to 5 minutes. And again, Khonsu is a brother I could speak with all day, but we do have these limitations.
Okay.
How do you fit in, and what's your vision, brother?
Well, at Manhood Academy, our specialist field is rites of passage, which is coming of age from boyhood to manhood. And we deem it the missing link in terms of the solutions with our young people. In indigenous cultures globally, whether it's in ancient China, ancient India, ancient Africa, even ancient Europe, rites of passage was a prerequisite from boyhood to manhood and girlhood to womanhood. So at the moment with our young people are, a lot of them are warrior class. They are warriors in nature. And there's a statistic that says that testosterone in your average teenage boy of 13 to 19 rises by 800% in adolescence, 800%. If that energy is not channeled, as the old African proverb goes, our young people will burn down the village. So that energy has to be channeled. And if not channeled, we're seeing what's happening right now. Our young people, not all of our young people, but some of our young people will implode on each other in order to exhaust their testosterone. So rites of passage in all cultures, we can take an ideal model of rites of passage, and that is in the Jewish community. Now in Israel, once you reach a certain age in your teenage years, for 2 years, you have to serve in the Israeli military, which is in essence rites of passage. But other cultures do not have the soul and spiritual aspect that we have in indigenous Africa. So you will serve your country, and in doing so, 2 years separated from your family, you will come back as a man. Also, the spiritual aspect and the model in the Jewish community is you also have a Jewish bar mitzvah. That's the spiritual aspect.
Yeah.
All right, which raises you to be responsible in the community. All right, those things are missing in our culture. They were there back in the ancient days, and they were a standard practice. In the African village, it was a standard practice. Let's take boys, for a boy to be taken away for a while by the wise elder men and built up and be taught what it is to be a man. All right, that's the missing link in our view in Manhood Academy of what our young people need. If in an ideal world, projects of rites of passage will be spread right across the UK. All right, you have models of it over here in terms of the Prince's Trust, where young people go for a process and it's character building, but the spiritual and cultural aspect is missing.
Yeah.
So that's what we do at Manhood Academy with our young people, and we just think it's just essential that we address doing things differently.
And and at this stage and juncture in our history, it's about us systemizing that. And that's the whole point of the pipeline. As we know, you've got multiple branches, and this is a London organization that can be national. And there are colleagues that you work with, such as WYLA and Origin, who collaboratively provide that service and are quite capable of doing it nationally. And also contributing to our educational curriculum as well. So just tell us a little bit about the curriculum as you sum up.
Okay, well, at Manhood Academy, say for example, in school, you got maths, English, science, geography, art. Our curriculum is earth, air, fire, and water, the primordial elements. So what's missing, say for example, in the school curriculum is speaking to the soul. So in essence, if we was to put in a sentence, we speak to the soul of our young people culturally.
Yeah.
And for example, let's go through the curriculum in like a bite-sized version. The earth element is to do with grounding. The earth element addresses the question, who am I? Which is a metaphysical concept, but we simplify it for the young people. Way down the line, when in their 30s or 40s, they might be like, yeah, what they taught me was actually this, when they start reading diligently maybe. But the earth element is to do with grounding and who am I? Am I this stereotype that's being force-fed down my throat by media and music, etc.? Or do I have an alternate? Julian Hall was talking about entrepreneurships. We're talking about, yeah, man, you can spin money legally. All right. That's where the skills of Julian Hall comes in. Our fire element deals with passion and anger. It's our most popular module, and we go real deep. One of the most important things we do is every boy has to write a letter to their father, because the father is the primordial model of a boy's manhood, whether the father is deceased in the boy's life or he's never met his father before. He will have the genetics and sometimes the nature of his father. So all of our boys go through a healing process a lot of the time where they write to their father, I've never met you, where are you? Or it could be, I love you, Dad, you do phenomenal things with me. But it's a healing, that's the fire element. We also address passion and anger. You know, how do you regulate yourself? You can be angry without being violent, without shouting. You could be angry with effective communication, getting your point across. So we teach them the social skills they'll need to navigate the system that they're going to be filtered into after school, college, and university. The other aspect of the fire element is passion. What are you passionate about? What do you want to become in the future? What is your future vision? The air element is to do with spirituality, mindfulness, and meditation. So we go through 101 meditation just so that our young people have skills in the future to regulate themselves and to keep themselves in a state of well-being. And the ear element is to do with entrepreneurship, and you know how we encourage, yeah, get your qualifications, go to university, college, etc., but also consider having a business. All members of the Manhood Academy have a business as well. Some of us work in mainstream education. I work in an SEMH school, high school, but I have a couple of businesses. I've got a book, Sacred Man, which is a rites of passage book, amongst other things, lecturing around the country. So we say exercise the principles of entrepreneurship, as well as if you choose to have a 9-to-5 job. So that's the basic elements of Manhood Academy, and it's rites of passage in essence. And it's urban rites of passage. Why do we say that? We use that term urban, but we live in an urban environment. We no longer have to go to the forest or jungle with our young people like indigenous Africa, all right? But we do live in an urban concrete jungle, an urban concrete jungle. So we train our young people in the skills they will need to survive and thrive in the urban concrete jungle that we all live in.
Beautiful. And, you know, the most important part is that culturally competent delivery. And that brings us to, and thank you for that, Khonsu. That brings us to my brother, Sayce,
Bless.
who is from Mentivity and delivers mentoring in schools, which is something which is very important for our young people to be able to relate to successful people in our community who they can visually see look like them and understand that there's a pathway into industries and areas of life that they might not even have had a concept of. So, Sayce, if you can tell us about what you do and about what your vision is and got you involved in the work that you're doing.
How you doing, my brother?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having me. Yes, Sayce Holmes Lewis, CEO and founder of Mentivity, which is a mentoring organization and an alternative educational provision based across schools in London and Brighton. So the main aim of our work is mentoring in schools, one-to-one mentoring, group conversation-based learning, which is a facet of informed education, which is based around youth work to affect positive change. So we target Black boys and Black girls predominantly because of the issues that they face within education. So what we've had to do is infiltrate education to make sure that we can give the support to young people in a setting which is not designed for them. We've been running for 4.5 years. I started off as a limited company because I didn't want people to look at us as being in need and being deprived. I wanted to showcase self-determination and show people that we're a business and we're taking this seriously. So over the last 4.5 years, 90% of our turnover, which is 6 figures every year now, have 14 staff, including my mum, my brother, who's my business partner, my sisters are mentors as well. Every year we bring in 90% of our turnover comes from schools. 10% of that has come from the UK government. And what I want to showcase is that we don't need the government to showcase what we can do in our community. And it's been hugely successful. We've evolved. We've got 14 staff now, which is phenomenal for a smaller organization which started 4.5 years ago. But I've been doing this work in the community for 21 years. And what I've seen and what I experienced as a young black male, growing up on the council estate, South East London, on the Ellsbury estate, if anyone knows it, and then moving to Peckham, was that this wasn't designed for me. Like anywhere that I wanted to progress, there was always obstacles based around institutional racism and stereotyping and racial profiling. And I tried the football route. I had to go to the Republic of Ireland to play football. And I went to Romania to play professional football. I did that for 2 years of my life. And England never gave me that opportunity, no matter what I did here. So I knew from a young age that no matter what I do, how hard I work, I wasn't going to get to where I needed to be. So I've always been a hustler. I've always been an entrepreneur in that respect, always known how to make money. And it was about kind of honing those skills from the streets as a young man and then bringing that towards business and applying my trade for the last 21 years. You know, I've been working in the community since I was 16. I first started working in the nightclub at the age of 13, cleaning the nightclub with my brothers. And that's how serious I was about showcasing self-determination and bringing in money to survive and also help the household. So Mentivity is really an extension of my family and my mom, who's a strong Black queen in terms of what she's done for us. You know, I'm the oldest of 7 children, and Mentivity is an extension of my family. And with my father not being around, I had to find my role models in different settings. And initially it was the streets, but then in education. I found strong black men in football, strong black men that gave me that support. So I'm trying to be representative of what I wanted to see when I was a young man and what I needed. And my son's 13. And when he was born, I made a vow that I was going to make this world a better place for him. And by doing that, I could do that for the rest of the community. So people will see for the last month has been crazy for Mentivity, where we've been delivering a program called the Raising Aspirations Project with Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs now are on the verge of giving us a substantial investment into the company because of what we're doing with young people. And the Raising Aspirations Project is creating a pipeline, a viable pipeline for young people to go into organizations that they would never even dream of. And thus, by bringing that money back into the community, it will help to uplift us. So we've had discussions with YouTube, with Google, with so many different organizations and brands. And it's something now is that we've got to showcase that we can do these things, but also that there's a part to play within this system, but also to create our own system, which is, you know, economic prosperity. And we need that. And because we don't have the economic background and foundation to do what we need to do, this is why we keep going around the same cycles and depending on the oppressor to give us what we need. And it's never going to happen that way. And what you're seeing now across the world is a revolution and an uprising, because everybody's had enough. And it's not just black people, which is what they don't want to see. They don't want to see the unification of people. You know, Bob talks about it, Bob Marley talks about it, the unification of Africa, but the unification of people. And that's what they don't want to see. And what you're seeing right now is a media campaign to distract us from what is, you know, going to happen anyway. And I've been quiet for too long. I've been suppressed for too long, oppressed for too long, and I refuse to be silenced now. And I've got to speak up, and we all got to speak up. We all got to do what we can do. Not everyone's going to be able to speak as a, you know, on the media stage and on their platforms, but people can do things behind the scenes. And, you know, Dean, what you've been doing for the last 2-3 years that I've noticed since I've come across you, it's just been nothing short of inspirational, phenomenal. So we need to come together as a collective. It's important that we lead as a collective. This is not a one-man movement. And where we've gone wrong in historically is that any movement that we've initiated has been a one-man movement. And when that person is killed, that movement just dies with that person. And it's not about that now. It's about a collectiveness. So that's where I'm at, and that's where we're at. And we know where it's going. Like, I'm ultra tired. I'm seeing myself on the screen now. My eyes look terrible, but I haven't got time to sleep because they're not sleeping and they're not stopping, and we can't stop. So that's what Mentivity is for me. It's my life's work. And by creating that opportunity for young people, you know, Khonsu spoke about speaking to their soul. This is what we do with Mentivity, speaking to their soul and stirring that soul and getting to understand how powerful they are, how amazing we are, despite being oppressed, that we create so much. Look at Black British culture now. Like, this is at the forefront on the world stage. In Hollywood, they want us. You know, music, they want us. They want everything to do with us. So the thing is now is that we have to cut off the oxygen supply to their survival, which is us. So once we do this, they thrive off our attention, and that's what the issue is. And when I say they, I say white people that don't want us to flourish. There are white people out there that do want us to flourish and that do have a voice and do understand that what is going on is wrong. So we can't say that, you know, we have allies. We know that. And someone just said sleep is the cousin of death. Yeah, Nas is my favorite rapper. So, you know, I look at this, and my philosophy has always been, you know, that of Malcolm. And when I first read his autobiography, that was something which stirred something within me, which allowed me then to flourish to become a professional football player at the age of 19. And after focusing for 5 years, it took me 5 years to make it from 14 to 19. And that's the kind of self-determination that I have. And now that this work has been bestowed upon me by the Most High, I've got to do this. And I'm not scared anymore. I'm not fearful. And I don't want our young people to be fearful, because this is why it's about, now they're saying I sound like his twin, but we've got to push. We've got to push now. And right now, what we're seeing is an emotional purging of the years of oppression. It's coming out. The energy is right. And we just need to strategize. And this is why I'm totally with you. I stand side by side with you and everybody that's here and that wants us to flourish and progress, because too long we had too many egos, too many people extracting money from our community for their own selfish means. It's not about that. It's about transparency, and it's about prosperity. So, if you want to get in touch with us, Mentivity, we're really pushing. We've just acquired another 40 grand contract today to do a large body of work with young Black boys and girls in Brighton and Worthing. We're on the verge of going to the next stratosphere, and that's what it's about right now, and showcasing that our product and what we do and our passion is going to shine through any oppression and anything that you're going to try and put in our way. And that's how I've always been. That's always been my mindset. And it's all about education. It comes up to education and inspiring our young people, because what we're going to do over the coming years is going to be unprecedented. No one's going to even believe that this whole system is crumbling, and we're going to turn it upside down. So I'm ready to be part of that movement. I always knew there's going to be a revolution in my lifetime. I always knew I was going to be part of that. The Most High has guided me through every experience that I've encountered. I nearly died twice at the age of 23. It wasn't my time, and I understand what path I'm on. So everyone's got to understand the path that you're on. And if you're viewing this now, you got to spread this message. But it's all about strategy. We fall short without strategy, and that's what the problem is. And once we have the strategy with the collectiveness and the collective spirit, that's it.
Thank you, Sayce. And so much of what you say will resonate with the men, because we come from a very similar background. My story, other than playing football and traveling, is verbatim, and even down to Malcolm X being that inspiration, which I think should be universal in our curriculum. But what we're seeing is that there's a spiritual alignment of those of a similar ilk who have not only had enough, but what we're seeing on this panel is not necessarily operational leadership, but visionary leadership. And this is just a fragment of who we are across the country. So we're seeing visionary leadership who are building our entities that are modular and scalable for national delivery. And when we align, it's a very powerful entity, because we don't need organizations like Redthread going top tier of resources. We go as a consortium, and we trickle that down to all of our grassroots organizations who are not only have sustainable businesses with a proven track record, but they're culturally competent, and they actually speak to the spirit, which is the most under-observed component. And it is that from a European perspective, Jung versus Freud. Now, Freud didn't recognize the spirit or consciousness, as it was termed by Jung, but we recognize the consciousness of young people, and we have to engage them in that. So thank you, Sayce and Mentivity. So moving to my brother, Nana Agyeman, my brother and my right hand. He might say my left hand, from Access UK, because we're now going into careers.
Okay.
We can hear you, sir.
You can hear me, yeah?
Tell us a little bit about how you fit into the pipeline, because this actually comes from many hours of conversations that me and Nana had over the course of a couple of years. And we have both taken the legacy of Malcolm X in being self-determined, and now you're looking at the fruition, and this is what this pipeline has produced from many hours of conversation, because as Nana knows, this is a very lonely road, and there are very few people you can talk to at this
100%.
particular tier of the game. So please, Nana, talk to us about what Access do and what your vision is for us.
Well, a good evening to everyone that's tuning in, first of all. Big up to everybody that's spoken so far, very inspirational. And this is what the so-called public health approach is, which, as we know, started in Scotland. It was a policy that was used to address youth violence and knife crime. Now, it was such a success over there that they brought it here to London. But what they're forgetting to tell us is that the policies that worked over in Scotland might not necessarily work over here. We live in a so-called multicultural society where half of the population of London is meant to be so-called BAME, Black and Ethnic Minority Ethnic. Okay, so we've got a high population of young and old Black people that live in London. But what's missing from that public health approach is a cultural competency. In other words, the relatability to people that look like us. And this is what we are bringing to the table in terms of today, talking about this cultural competent term that we've been using consistently throughout this discussion. In terms of access, which stands for African Caribbean Careers and Employment Support Services, UK. Access came about, or the concept for access came about off the back of the 2011 riots. Some people call it uprisings, disturbances, whatever you want to call it, okay? The concept came out of it because what we realized from our studies at the time I worked for a private firm that dealt with the long-term unemployed, helping them into work, training, etc. And I was commissioned to do some work on the causes of the riots. And when I found this data at the time, data that said, for example, 1 in 2 of our young people were unemployed. Our graduates were 3 times more. The unemployment rate amongst our young graduates were 3 times higher than white graduates. So when I sort of collated all this data, it showed me there's a big gap in service delivery that was tailored to address the issues that we were facing. So access came off the back of that, obviously my passion for our people. But it was a way of monetizing that passion in a professional way. So we deal with the 3 E's: education, employment, and enterprise as a 3 key solutions for our young people. Now we know that that's not the only solution. We know that, like our brother said earlier, our brother Sayce said earlier, it's about playing our role within that jigsaw, right? Which is the public health approach. The public health approach basically means early intervention. These are the key components: early intervention and a multi-agency approach to dealing with issues rather than working in silos. Again, as my brother Sayce was saying earlier, the propensity amongst our community has always been, people thinking they've got all the answers, people think they could do it by themselves, and it's never worked. And it's clear 2 heads, 3 heads, 4 heads are better than 1. And we all have our lanes. We all have our speciality. I can't do what Sayce does, and I'm sure Sayce can't do what I do, but we can complement each other. And this is why we are such passionate supporters of the public health approach, a culturally competent public health approach, and working in collaboration with an extended network of providers within our community at grassroots level and everywhere else, even across the world. Because the solutions are not just based over here. There's actually, a global solutions based to our work in Africa, Caribbean, wherever it may be. But it's about connecting the dots on the ground and delivering the work. So again, just to tie it up, Access UK, careers and guidance, employability, focus on the 3 E's: education, employment, and enterprise. These are the solutions we're offering to our young people to help them circumvent the booby traps that are within the system, and to help them with different pathways that the generic stuff that they kind of engage with in the mainstream can't solve, because it's not structured. Mainstream services are not structured to do with our particular issues and our particular challenges. So that's Access UK. That's what we do.
So just talking about those pathways, I know you got 2 programs coming up for delivery that were interrupted by COVID-19 self-isolation. So
Indeed.
speak on those, I know, respectively in Brent and Haringey.
So at the moment, obviously we deliver these programs. We've been delivering them for the last 6-7 years. But the 2 projects you're talking about specifically, one is called Manage, MAN, And then age, playing around with words, manage, which is going to be a leadership program we're running in Haringey with 20 of our young black men in Haringey, just giving them the tools, the components that's required to be a leader. So the hope is that we would develop 20 strong young black men that have got the focus, that have got the guidance to go out there into the community and be ambassadors and spread the knowledge and spread the love. So that's it. That's in Haringey, and that's starting imminently actually. Maybe in the next few weeks it's going to kick off. That's in Haringey. The second program we're looking to implement, and it's programs we run in various forms, various names before. It's a road CEO program. Now, to simplify it, is basically helping our young people, a lot of them are on the road, quote unquote, to make the transition from the road to legitimate business. But it's helping them, it's giving them the tools to be able to do that, because lots of them want to do it, but they don't know how. So the whole point of the program is to help them make that transition, make it real, make it tangible, by giving them the tools in a language they understand, and with teachers and advisors that they can connect with. People like Julian, who spoke earlier, and there's lots of other people in the community that will plug into that delivery of the program. That's going to be running in Brent for 2 years. The hope is within 2 years, we would have secured enough, paper to continue that indefinitely. But initially, it's 2 years in Brent, targeting, our young people, help them make that transition, make it real.
Kinana, we look forward to seeing the pipeline go live. And I now want to introduce my brother, David Mullins from Father Figure. Now, David deals with the cases again, but which when it breaks down, but with the parent to child intervention. David actually has a very unique role that I can't describe. And this is based on his life experience, which is very diverse. But he's going to tell you specifically about what Father Figure do and the kind of interventions they make. Please, David. Yes,
Evening, evening, and evening to everyone that's come on before me and anyone that's on watching. You are correct. I don't know what do I do? I hate when people actually ask me that question, because it sparks up a conversation that's going to go on for a few minutes. But to be succinct, Father Figure is something that launched back in 2011. Next week, actually, we'll celebrate 9 years. It was born out of frustration of austerity and services being cut. The few services that have ever been actually introduced specifically for fathers, which happened in children's centres when Sure Start started by the Labour government. I think it was Tony Blair. And I was what they called a father's worker. Didn't know what the hell that was when they first spoke to me about it. In fact, I even said when it was kind of punted to me, I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, worked for a charity and learned a new skill. I would say I learned a new skill. A lot of it was quite actually natural in terms of the way I was brought up and what I was able to bring to the table. But as I said, austerity measures kicked in, and the first thing they cut was this project. Now, I'm a Northwest London boy, Kensal Green, Stonebridge, Harlesden. Not going to get into the whole what these youngers would deal with when we talk about areas. I'm Northwest London, Northwest 10. And I've got friends that are doing real great in life, doing really good. But I've also got friends that are dead, friends that have murdered, and friends that are still not probably on the straight and narrow. And I took stock and I looked at that and I thought, well, what was the biggest difference for me? Because I've been there. I've but for the grace of God, I'm not sitting here at all, 100%. And I figured it was the moral kind of compass that I got from my mum and my dad. And I realized how important actually my father was. And he wasn't perfect, but what he gave me was enough. It was enough. And I looked at my friends who had fallen foul, or my peers, and they didn't quite have that. didn't quite have it. So when I was made redundant, mentally it just really took me somewhere different, and I was like, nah, I've always been able to eat food. Okay, no one's ever stopped me eating food, and this was not a place that I wanted to be. So that's how Father Figure was born, really. And I didn't know what it was going to do, and it's still taken me in directions. Only 10 weeks ago, it's taken me in a whole new direction, and maybe even over in the last 10 days, I'm about to go in a whole new direction again. But ultimately, what I have done over that period of time is I've set up services for local authorities, mainly Brent, that would help to engage fathers with children. I still to date in Brent provide a commission service where I work one-to-one with men who have been who have got involved with children and family services, so to speak. And you know, Nana just spoke about that cultural competence. I think a lot of my success really does come down to the fact that I'm culturally competent. I can work with anyone, and especially someone who looks like me, who doesn't feel that these services understand him or want to really even help him, just think that they're there to set him up. And that has played a major, half my success is that I'm a black man. And I've been saying for years, there's no, for me anyway, for the first time in my life, for a few years now, in the work I do, I'm at a major advantage being a black man. And so are we all. We just don't often realize it. I always say to young people, like, you know, you could put me anywhere in this country, from somewhere where I would need to be suit and tied up, you know, with nobody in the room with my complexion. I'll be fine. I can handle it. I can manage that. I'm good. To the darkest shubin wherever in any city, I'm gonna be all right. Just give me a wall to keep my back to. I'm fine. I'll be okay. We can't say that for some of our cousins. We cannot say that for some of our cousins. So if we can be those chameleons, yeah, if we can be that in the world, this wicked world that we know that we've always been living in, because it's only now that some people with our complexion are realizing how wicked it has been, but never mind them. Our European cousins are starting to acknowledge it after 8 minutes and 46 seconds. They are acknowledging the wickedness they've bestowed upon us. And we've still strived. We've still been able to get through. So if we can do that under those circumstances, God knows what the future holds for us. So some of my work as well is helping men who have been denied contact with children, to help them to regain contact. And look, I must say it's a very it's a challenging piece of work, because I work with men who have used domestic violence and abuse. And what I do understand and I do know is that some men can use that process to be further abusive. So my experience that I have in my field, which is about 14 years now, helps me to navigate that. And I can't tell you I've always 100% got it right. I try my best to, but what I will tell you is that for any work I do, children are my clients. Yes, I help men. Yes, I specialize in helping men. I can work with any parent. Some social workers more recently have been asking me to take on some of their clients, which are actually not men. And I think that's because I can speak to these families in a way that a social worker who's in the system probably can't. And so, what do? I do all of those things. More recently, we've launched, since COVID, something called Men Talking, the acronym being Men, Mental, Talking, and King. Men Talking. We are now having 30 to 50, last week we had 50 men on a call discussing various issues that are specific to us. And what I'm realizing is that, and I say us, the space hasn't been advertised as a space for black men, but that's who have come to the space, and anyone is welcome. I'll say this publicly. If you go to the website, there's actually a page called Men Talking and Black Men Talking. I'm no longer going to even have black men talking. It will be men talking. Everybody's welcome in that space. If you're not comfortable in that space, so be it. I've lived in European space all my life. I've got on trains where I'm the only black man. I've gone in rooms where I'm the only black man, and I've had to make it happen. So anyone's welcome. If you're not comfortable, welcome to my life and my world that I've lived in for a long time. So in terms of what we have here, I am looking forward to working with many people. One of the things, the challenges I've always found is that, you know, a lot of the funding that is out there, it's always for young people, it's for children. And I'm always like, hold on, like, you've got to start with the parents, okay? But that's just not where they tend to focus. Yeah. So for me, it is great to be able to maybe to collaborate with all the other services in here, and also as part of this package to try and impart some of my knowledge through training other professionals and people who maybe want to get into the field. I'm no master trainer in terms of, you know, I've got no necessary top skills in being able to train people, but I do know I have an ability to engage with people, be they men or not. And I definitely have skills that will be able to help people engage with men. I train social workers around how they engage fathers. So through this process, this funding that we hope to get, some of what I will be doing is to train up other people, because I can't do it all. I can't be everywhere doing all these different bits of work. So yeah, not sure if there's anything else you want to hear from me.
I really appreciate it. And what you brought to the table is the scalability that we require at this stage, because we've had so many one-man and two-man operations, which is based on, we know, other organizations coming in and acquiring the resources in our name that didn't touch the sides. Yeah. And then our community is pointed at as, well, you've had the money, but you haven't moved forward. When it didn't touch the sides, because we know that nepotism and the old boys network is the game. Well, this is actually the culturally competent network that is required. So we are no longer leaving our people behind. And you know that in building out a female counterpart, to have male and female facilitators out there doing exactly what you're doing in all of the boroughs where we find ourselves, exactly how powerful that intervention is.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your contribution, and even more for the contributions you're going to be making as we go into the pipeline. So in summary, what we are now looking at is a schools to industry pipeline, which is us, where we are all tapped into a CRM tool that we are communicating frequently, professionally, where we share all of our resources, all of our policies and procedures. We can identify delivery partners for consortium-based projects, but we're creating a catch net for our young people where there is no ability for them to fall through the gaps, whether that is advocating for them in the current school system, whether that is delivering mentors to that school system, whether it is the rites of passage and giving them those skills just to negotiate the environment that we're in now, and have found ourselves for the past 70 years since we landed from the Windrush generation. So I'm now talking to delivery partners and funders. Please go to the ADPAC website, download the schools to industry document, and understand exactly what this pipeline looks like, and that this is just a fragment of delivery partners that we'll have. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to speaking to you again on other topics. Great week.